Tonight we welcome Dr. Dawn A. Murray and her book, MONPA, Medicinal Plants, Indigenous Knowledge from a Himalayan Healer. Welcome, Dawn.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Murray is a professor at Antioch University where she teaches environmental studies courses to both graduate and undergraduate students. She has been collaborating with the Tribal Trust Foundation as a board member and the director of international education and research for over 10 years. Dawn leads trips to Bhutan and has lived there for 6 months teaching ecology. This book project was also sponsored by the Tribal Trust Foundation and the Tarayana Foundation. So take it away, Dawn. Let's hear you talk about the book.
Thank you so much, and thanks to Chaucer's Books for hosting this event. Yes. All right, so I am a professor, but I'm super nervous. I haven't given many talks since COVID, especially in audiences like this, about something that is so personal to me. So bear with me, I have notes that I want to read from. So I really want to thank you all for attending. I know it's been a hot week and everyone has other things to do at 6 o'clock on a Monday night. So thank you for being here. I also want to, on behalf of the illustrator, Holly Sherwin, she could not be here this evening. She had a family obligation. She's the one that has done the amazing illustrations in the book and created the cards as well. She lives in Montecito. She's a local woman, and if you would like to reach her about any art supplies, any art techniques, she'd love to talk to any of you. I'd also like to acknowledge the land that we're standing on today that Chumash people have been stewarding for thousands of years. One of my former students, Emma Lombardi at Chumash, is here today. Thank you for coming, and she's actually doing her master's work on some of the Chumash heritage subjects. Yes. And your daughter too. Daughter, hi. I haven't met you yet. So I was lucky enough to be invited to teach biodiversity and conservation in Bhutan for 6 months. I did bring my boys, who are right here, so if you have questions about what it's like to live in Bhutan or why you should travel in February with me on a trip that I'm leading to meet the MONPA, talk to them when I'm signing the book. Sorry, I told you I wouldn't do that, but I did. And as the director of research and education for the Tribal Trust Foundation, our goal is to support the preservation of indigenous cultures and knowledge. So with this, we work with smaller communities that don't often get as much kind of international attention as maybe a cultural, international or cultural survival group. And we have worked with a group of the Maya in Tulum, the San Bushmen, and this group, the MONPA. So I don't want to take too long because of the heat, lest you turn to page 35 in the book and figure out that there is a plant that is in the Himalayas that would help us cool off. There's also a Chumash, is it yerba? I wrote it down somewhere, yerba santa, known by the Chumash if you have a fever, if you're too hot. I don't have any plants here today, so I'm going to make this brief. This is a story, this is a book and a story about an incredible community and a group of people, the MONPA, the indigenous people of Bhutan. Bhutan is a small Himalayan nation. It's a constitutional monarchy, and it's sandwiched between India and China, and there are still disputed boundaries to the north along the China border. And how many of you have ever visited Bhutan? So it's really far away. If you look at a globe and you're looking at Santa Barbara here, and Bhutan is basically on the exact opposite side of the globe. So I couldn't have gone farther away from home. And the other piece, besides these brilliant people who are extremely environmentally resilient and have conservation as part of their bones, I also want to talk to you about the methodology that I used in collecting the data for the book. So I'm a biologist. I'm interested in changes of animals and plants and people with climate change. So this is how seasons maybe affect different birds in migration, how humans, like you've heard stories probably of people in Alaska that have had to move because the land isn't freezing as much as it used to and it's sinking. So these are all adaptations that people, plants, and animals make to our changing climate. And it's fascinating to me to look at these people in Bhutan because they have lived sustainably on the land for thousands of years. And so the way this project started was an ask. The indigenous people of Bhutan asked the Tribal Trust Foundation for help preserving their culture. The government of Bhutan, again, is a Buddhist nation, put in a school, and all the children in the village were then to attend the school. And the MONPA elders were worried that they were going to forget their language and their culture and their ways of living, and so could we help support their culture? We were extremely far away. The Tribal Trust is based in Santa Barbara, so how are we going to do this? Well, they said, this is what we want. We want a book. So the elder, Aptala, so he's the doctor, he said, could you please create a beautiful book this is exactly what he wanted. It's gonna make me cry just a little. So he wanted me to write a book that I shared with people in the West who don't know anything about the MONPA people and who never probably heard of Bhutan. So that, so that people would know who they are and people would understand how much knowledge they have about the environment and how closely connected they are to the environment and how sustainably they've lived all these years. And just because we don't know about them doesn't mean that they're not important or they haven't existed. And so that was one thing I thought I could do. There's other projects we've worked on, including getting them access to nettle cloth that they wanted to use to weave. They hadn't been able to weave their own clothing for years and years and years, and that was a climate change issue. The plant wasn't growing as much, so we had to source it from somewhere else. They didn't need any help with making rules for harvesting crops or anything. They already managed all of their resources so well. They never over-harvested. It's like farmer's market every day in this community. But what they needed was awareness. And the other ask was, could you create like an eco-tourist program where you're bringing people and they can see who we are, they can learn about our ways, and they can go back to where they live and tell people about us. So that's the second thing that we do. We lead trips. I've brought students. I don't see any of the students that traveled with me before, but I've brought Antioch students on a trip, and when we were there in 2019, right when the pandemic was starting in China, just north of us, we had the first ever MONPA Day. So it was a day dedicated to them showing us how they weave, how they make pottery, how they do how they live sustainably. It was a fabulous day. Elliot can tell you more about that day, too. He was there on that trip. So they live in the Black Forest Mountains. It's a biodiversity hotspot. It's a very special area, and wow, I kind of touched on everything I wanted to say. To complete this book project, as I said, it was this participatory conservation effort, which is a different type of framing than a lot of science is done under. A lot of scientists kind of go in and they assess the situation and they collect a lot of data and they decide this is what we're going to do to preserve the lion or the tiger or this tree. And they don't necessarily take into account the people who are living there. Now you've seen in the last 10 years there's been this real upsurge in participatory conservation, and that's when people go in and they ask, and this is specifically, I'm thinking like in Africa with some of the safari kind of groups. Those are the people that are leading the safaris. Those are the people that are making sure poaching isn't happening, and they're being paid to do that work instead of needing to, hunt the animals or cut down the trees for their own survival. So that is what the academic framework of my work is really going into a location where there is an ask first from the community, And once there's an ask, there's like we have meetings with stakeholders, and this is the for-profits, nonprofits, government organizations, and the MONPA people from all the generations, all the different villages. So you have little kids in your meetings, you have elders, you have parents, you have teenagers, and you ask them, what do you want? What do you think would work? What would be the best for you? And so, with that, this book again is just one piece of the projects that we've been doing with them. What I love about this book specifically is that there's 13 plants. 13 is an auspicious kind of lucky number in Bhutan. There's some things in the book that you might not know unless you knew some kind of, I don't know, nuances about Bhutanese and their culture. But that's one of them, 13 plants he wanted in the book. And all of the plants grow near where they are, so it's really a sustainable way of using the plants, and he can treat anything. He can treat anything from tuberculosis to headaches to migraines to broken bones. There is a clinic, like I said, it's a 2-hour walk from the village, and so that can be a problem. What he was worried about before we started this book project was, he said to me, and this is to me with 3 interpreters, because he speaks his language, and then I need 2 or 3 people to interpret it to Dzongkha, the language in Bhutanese, and then in Bhutan, and then English. And I always make sure there's 2 so I can make sure I'm really understanding what they're saying. Was no one wanted to learn. No one wanted to learn his wisdom. They, the teenagers were kind of wanting to move out, and he was worried what would happen to my village people if there's no doctor here. And so since we started showing up, and researchers from Bhutan, we partnered with the Biodiversity Center in Bhutan, and they would send researchers up, and we'd write down everything he was saying. All of that kind of attention to it has brought 2 people forward who want to learn from him. So he now has 2 apprentices. So he's very happy with that. This wisdom will continue on, and our hope is that we will keep doing these festivals and bringing people to kind of eco-culturally learn about them, and that's about it, I think. Does anyone have any questions? Thanks for listening. Sorry that I think I talked longer. I don't know. I had more notes. I don't know. Yes. Oh, thank
you. Did you actually ever observe the medical process while you were actually there? And if so, could you tell us a little bit about that experience, and not only your interpretation, but those that were gathered that perhaps had seen that in previous trips?
Yes. The first night on the second trip that we went, he came in and said hello to us when the group arrived of students, and then he explained that he had to go because a cow had fallen and hurt her leg, and he had to go take care of the cow. And so I hadn't realized until then that he was also an animal, like he did people and animals. So I'm trying to ask him all these questions before he goes, what do you mean you're helping a cow? A bone? You're going to get an x-ray? And he knows all the bones and where they're supposed to be. The cow had hurt herself in a ravine. He had to go, but he wanted to welcome me. So off he went the next day. He came back and said it was just a sprain. He had wrapped it, and he had put this, the Artemisia. It's a plant that they use for swelling. We have a variety here on the cow. She was much better within 3 days by the time we left. Yeah, that was one. The other one was one of my travelers had some issues with elevation, and we had elevation medicine from here that people could take. So she took that, but he also said, oh, I have a tea, and I didn't see exactly what he mixed up, but it was a whole bunch of plants. I said, if you want to drink it, okay. And she did. She felt much better within 10 minutes. Yeah. So those are just some of the things that I noticed. Yeah, right in action. Yes.
Have the MONPA people gotten support historically and currently from the country, the government?
That's a good question. So support, that what they've gotten was the school was built, and that was support. And then in the last 2 years, they've gotten electricity. So that is kind of support. But they want to, they wish to live where they are and not kind of have to be moved or resettle somewhere. So that's what we're kind of pushing as support, if you know what I mean? It's a different kind of support. They don't need money per se. They need the ability to live on their land and maintain their traditional ways of living. That is a little bit hard because in Bhutan, the government kind of wants to make sure all the indigenous groups are assimilated and they have a higher level of education than maybe they have access to, because the school right there is only elementary school. So that's another kind of branch that we're going to have to talk to them about. You know, what do you want for a higher education? There's one girl, MONPA girl, Sonam Yankee, who is, she has a phone, she has a cell phone, she's in school in the city. She and Elliot and I text all the time. She wants to be a doctor, and so through our trips we've raised money to send her. We had to get permission from the mother and the government and her sister and her aunties. Everyone gave permission. She wants to be a doctor. She's really determined, so she's going to a school for high school because there's no high school there, and we'll see what happens from there. But it's all based on, you know, what do they want for support. So we're kind of reminding the government, did we ask them what they want in our conversations that we're in?
Can you talk about the trip to Bhutan in February?
Yeah, so in February we're going. I don't have anyone signed up yet, so I'm going because I'm delivering the book. So I have to, you know, make good on my promise here. It is I have a little flyer here. It's 10 days, 10 nights. You fly to Bangkok. Everything is included when you get to Bhutan. So you get your flight from Bangkok to Bhutan. We fly, we do one leg so that you don't have to do all the curvy roads, both to the Black Forest and out. And we spend 2 nights, I would call it, or 3 nights glamping with them. It's a little bit like El Cap. It's beautiful tents with thick mattress beds, and you get to see where we're living in their community. So it's 3 days of the 10-day trip, and the rest of it we're visiting biodiversity hotspots, sacred sites, doing lots of hikes, and like Tiger's Nest hike, a very famous hike. Yeah, it's a life-changing trip from anyone who's ever been. I'd love to have any of you come.
What size group?
I usually take about 10.
Is there a website they can visit to get more information?
There is, and I have a few flyers, and they can take a picture of this if they want to. Thanks for asking. I didn't ask you if I could talk about that, but
No, go
it's
for
part
it.
of it. And then my email and phone number is on here, and you can get more information. Yeah. Yes.
So
One of my students.
Are you taking students or just general public?
Both.
Both.
Yeah. I've invited students as well. You were going to go on the first one in 2019 before the
Almost did.
pandemic. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish you had. Yes.
Is it the MONPA's land? Are they set there,
that's
or
a
is there
good
a
question.
danger of them being
That-
encroached on?
That's a good question. They are, did I mention they're a 2-hour walk away from the nearest kind of town? Right now, they are, it's one of my other students, bye Nate. Right now, they are pretty safe with the land that they have in that it's so remote. Like, it is hard to get there. It's not one of those places that's gonna be easy for people to like settle and build buildings. But that doesn't mean it wouldn't happen in the future, so we're just kind of trying to keep a hand in like what's happening, how are you, what's going on, so that we can help. It's interesting with the government, it does a lot when someone outside the country like asks a question in a nice, respectful way, compared to, you know, the people within the country. They're very deferential to the king and to their land, and they don't want to potentially say anything that's disrespectful, which I really admire. But there's a way that we have found that the tribal trust representatives can kind of ask questions that lead to, maybe we do need to preserve this, and does it need to be, you know, designated somehow? Bhutan as a country has like over 65% of their land is preserved. You can't develop it. It's in their national constitution to keep it that way. And there's corridors. So they have tigers, they're the country with the snow leopards, they have elephants, they have, what else, guys? Endangered lemur, langur, thank you, not lemur. Cranes. I mean, they have this incredible biodiversity because they have these huge mountains, and then down by India, it's much lower elevation. So it goes from like tropical forest all the way up to the Himalayas, snow-capped mountains. Oh, the other thing about Bhutan, sorry, I get so excited, is that they don't believe in climbing their tallest peaks, right? So you know, Mount Everest, there's all these expeditions. They believe their tallest peaks, their forests are sacred. And so you don't climb the tallest peak. You don't pay thousands of dollars and have Sherpas to go up to the mountain. You revere them from where you can, but it's a very different mindset. And so that's really special about this country. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Can you explain about sovereignty? Is the tribe sovereign within their land, and then there's a monarchy?
There is. So there's a constitutional monarchy that's the government that's very respected, and they have a parliament. And then in their region, there's like a governor. And the governor actually had never been to MONPA land until 2019 when we had our first MONPA day, and we invited him, and he showed up, and we had a huge tent and lots of food and dancing, and we actually have pictures I can show you of him getting a healing from Aptala, which the MONPA people said was unheard of. So they have their own sovereignty in terms of daily decisions, but this school was compulsory. Their children had to go to this school. And at the school they were learning, as I said, English and the language in Bhutan, which is Dzongkha. There's over like 130 languages spoken in this teeny tiny country, so they've chosen this Dzongkha language. Sandra and I took a class in it. We can't hardly speak it at all. Maybe you can still count to 10. I can't. It's very complicated, but it's also a beautiful language when you're listening. Kuzuzampola is hello, how are you? That's the only one I can still remember. So it's a mix, you know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then just a follow-up question. You talk about the revering mindset. Is that throughout the population, or just within the tribe, or is it like the entire
It's really really obvious with the MONPA people. It is also very common. I think it's a part of the Buddhist nature. I think it's very common in the whole country. Yes. The people, I mean, when we showed up, the people are incredibly friendly and are willing to help you find your way. Do you need a bed? Do you need this? Do you need this? I'm like, I just need food for my kids. What can they eat? You know, peanut butter and jelly. You know, we ended up getting stuff. Very, very helpful and mindful of being respectful, being kind, taking care of nature. It's a little bit different than here. And this whole thing about not going into the forest and not disturbing the forest. And then the boys and I have a fun story. We were collecting trash one day. When you guys want to tell the story? You don't remember? So we were collecting trash one day, and these little boys started joining us. So we had get bigger and bigger things of trash. And then the lightning and thunder was way up in the mountains and sounded really loud, boom. And one of the boys looked, I think, at Elliot and said, "Oh, that's the dragon." And we kind of looked at him and he was like, "Yeah, there's a protective dragon." That, you know, Bhutan is also known as Dracul, land of the thunder dragon. There's a thought that there's, you know, a protective dragon that helps protect the country. He was dead serious, like serious. So it is a belief. It's part of the culture. You know, you respect nature, you take care of each other, and you use things sustainably. Yeah.
How old is the healer?
Oh, so he is 84. He's 84, 85 now.
Okay, so he needed
He needed help. So what he said was, his actual words were, "I'm dead up to here," and pointed to his leg. And I didn't understand what that meant, but he's walked barefoot his whole life. I feel like, giant with this indigenous group. He's a small man and walks with a cane now. And he says, I'm dead up to here. I have to find people that want to learn this. Otherwise, everything I know will be lost. So, and he's just a marvelous human being.
Oh,
Yeah.
speaking of that, is his teaching oral? Or
Yes.
is he gonna, okay.
Yes. We have sent recorders up, and so there's a lama, Buddhist lama who's there who is recording him. But what's harder to record is how much to mix, and that's what's not in the book. I didn't, I've already had a few people in the U.S. say, "Can I make this medicine from, this?" I said, "Oh, this is not meant to be like a recipe for how to make the medicine. This is really just to show how wise they are and how sustainably they've lived." So what's hard on the recordings, they've said, is to figure out how much of what, and they use the roots, and they use the leaves, and they use the petals, and they use the seeds, and they use all the different parts, and there's different mixtures. And so that's harder for them to kind of document, and that's why I'm so glad he has two people that are learning directly from him. Yes.
You had mentioned about the ask,
Yes.
of the
Of the
indigenous
participatory
people,
conservation, yeah.
And then you've also mentioned the Chumash, and your friend is here, and I was wondering, has there been an ask of the Chumash that you know of? For what they might
Chumash,
need for, yeah.
Emma,
Yes.
has there, or did you want her to answer? Has there been an
I thought
ask?
that might be the thing, yeah.
Sorry.
You don't have, so I think the question is, have the Chumash asked?
Have they
or-
been asked
Have they been asked? Oh, have they been asked?
what they need?
We have worked on our board, so one of our board members is here, Marilyn O'Malley. You wanna wave your hand? We had a board member for about 15 years, Art Cisneros, who is a Chumash elder. He spearheaded several projects that we worked on. One is a trail in Montecito where all the plants are named and their medicinal uses are documented. I'm trying to think of others. There's numerous. Did you want to say anything about the Chumash here specifically?
So something people don't understand about the Chumash is that there was over 200 tribes of the Chumash, and they're all their own tribal communities, and they have their own language. So my language in Santinez is Samala, and so that's the language I'm learning right now to try to preserve it. But not all the tribes are the same, and so the Santinez tribe is the only federally recognized tribe. So right now we're actually building our museum on the 246. So if anybody, it should be opening up in the winter time, and that's how we preserve our culture as the Chumash. We do have 2 of our very sacred books that only our tribal members have, that have all of our ceremonies, all the medicines, songs, dancing, like all of that is in these books from one of my great-great-great-grandmother sat with somebody like a MONPA man, and we have recordings of everything. There's 100,000 pages of it. So, it's really hard because there's so many different smaller tribes to preserve everything because there's just so much information. So if there isn't an elder or somebody to teach that information to, then and it's getting harder and harder to be able to teach the generations after. So it's very difficult to keep an indigenous culture alive. So.
And there's a lot of, there's the Coastal Band, and there's the Barbareno. There's a group that's really associated with the Maritime Museum. I think that is the Barbareno. So you could, look on their website and see some of the work that they're doing. A lot of the Chumash are doing a lot of work themselves in this area, which is great to see.
No, regarding the local Chumash, during fiesta every year. We help build some stages here, and as a group we had a discussion that the local Shumish, how can we bring their culture and display here locally to honor them. And we've been talking about that, the fact that there's small tribes, how can that be represented? And I think the work you do with the local community, is there any possibility to look at into that to bring, because there is a August United Nations Indigenous Day worldwide celebrated. Maybe that day or that
Yeah.
we can
Well-
do something, and we're talking about it. The former professor from Santa Barbara, Patrick Foster, he and I, and we've been discussing about it for a while.
Baletta, you should meet Emma. Baletta, Emma Baletta. Yeah, that's a great idea. And I feel like I've gone